So, yeah, we just read the Grimm brothers story, Iron John. You want to give a summary and then we'll talk about it?
Mhm. Yeah, so there's a king with vast forest near his palace, and he can find like all sorts of animals in there. So one day he sends a hunter to get him a deer, and he sends the hunter, and that hunter doesn't come back. So on the second day, he then sends two hunters and their dogs, and they both go, and neither they or the dogs never come back. So now there's three missing hunters and dogs. And after that, he deems the forest too dangerous and it goes unvisited for a while. No one goes into the forest and he seems to forbid it.
Yeah, for years.
Mhm. So one day, an unknown hunter comes and presents himself to the court, and he tells the king that he has no fear of the forest and that he'll go in there and find out what made all the hunters and the dogs go missing. And the king forbids it, but the hunter says that, yeah, he has no fear and that he's going to go anyways. So that hunter goes with his dog into the forest, and they reach a lake, and when his dog gets near the lake, a long, skinny hand comes out and drags his dog into the water. So after seeing that, the hunter he orders two other men to like grab buckets, and they drain the lake. And once they drain the lake enough, they see that there's this very long, skinny person with long hair.
Like
Um,
rust
mhm.
colored
Oh,
person
colored skin. So they tie him up and they bring him before the king. And the king has him imprisoned in a cage
in the
with the,
court.
yeah, in the court with the queen holding the key. Uh, so, yeah, time passes, and one day, like the little prince, he's out playing and he loses a ball. It actually goes into the cage. So he goes up to the cage, and uh I think the old man, I don't know if he's known as Iron John at this point, but basically Iron
Yeah, not
John
yet.
told, not yet, but the little prince asks for the ball back, and the man says that he'll give him the ball if he unlocks the cage, and the little prince refuses and says that the king has forbidden it, so he walks away.
By the way, the prince is 8 years old.
Mhm. And then the prince comes back a second day and he asks for the ball again. And the man tells him that only if he unlocks the cage will he get the ball back. And the prince refuses. And then on the third day, the prince asks for the ball again.
By the way, the
And
king
it's,
has gone hunting now on
yeah, and
this
it's
third
the
day.
same thing. Um, the boy refuses, but then like the man knows that the queen has hidden it under his pillow. So he tells the prince that if he really wants the ball back, to go get the key under the queen's pillow and to free him, and then he can get his ball back. Um, so the prince is impatient at this point to get the ball back, so he actually does go and find the key under the queen's pillow, and he unlocks the door.
And he pinched
And
his
when,
finger when he did so.
hmm, yeah,
He
he
pinched
pinched a
his
finger.
finger.
And after that, like the old man picks him up and tells him that he will not see his family for a long time, but that he can give him a comfortable life with all the riches of the world, if he
Well,
comes with him.
kind of like the man had hurried away actually, and the boy
Yeah.
had like called after him saying,
Mm.
"I'm gonna be whipped." And then the man took him
Mm.
onto his shoulder.
Yeah. Yeah, so he puts the prince onto his shoulder and tells him that yeah, he'll live a comfortable life with riches, as long as he can stay by the a well and watch over it and make sure that nothing goes into the water. So yeah, the boys at the well after they go into the forest, and he looks into the well and sees there's like golden fish and other like golden animals that he sees
Gold snakes and fish.
periodically. Um, so yeah, the I think at this point the man tells him he's Iron John, or
Mm.
I think, but I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
it's about yeah.
Um, so yeah, like the first day the boy is watching over the well and he hurts his finger at some point and he dips it into the water. And when that happens, one of the tip of one of his fingers becomes like golden. Um, so Iron John would like come by to see him every day to make sure that he didn't allow anything in the water. So
Every
Iron
evening.
John comes and he's hiding his finger behind his back, and he tells them to show him the finger because he already knows something has happened. So the prince shows him the finger, and Iron John says that yeah, that he shouldn't have done that, but since it's the first time, he'll let it go as long as he keeps overseeing the well and making sure nothing happens again. So he leaves, and on the second day, the boy he tries to be careful, but at some point he rubs his head, and a strand of his hair falls into the water, and that turns golden. So he tries to take it out quickly, but it's already turned gold. And Iron John comes back because he knows something happened, and he finds out about the strand of hair, and he tells him that the prince, that he has the last chance, and if something happens again, he can't live with him in the forest anymore. Um, so the boy agrees. But on the third day, he gets bored and kind of tries to look at his reflection intently in the well. And he keeps getting closer and closer. And eventually that causes his hair to fall down, his entire hair to fall down into the water. So he panics and takes his hair out, but it's too late. Like his entire head of hair has become gold now. Um, and he tries to like tie it up or hide it in some way, but
with
Iron
his
John
with his pocket
comes back,
handkerchief.
and yeah, he knows what happened. Like he sees the hair and he tells him that he's broken the agreement and that because of that he can't live with him in the forest anymore and that he will know a life of poverty. Um, but he says that because he has a good heart, though, that if there ever comes a day he needs help, he can call upon his name in the forest and he'll immediately come to help him. So the
Yeah,
boy has to leave.
he has to go to the forest and cry Iron John, and then I will
Mhm.
come and help you.
So the boy leaves and he goes through many beaten paths and eventually he reaches a city and he tries to find work, but he can't because he has no skills. Um, and eventually in the city, he reaches a palace, and there he asks if there's any way he can make a living with them. And they don't have anything in mind, but they take him in out of pity. And
And it says they like him.
yeah. So his first job is as a kitchen boy, so he's kind of in charge of, I think, chopping wood and occasionally bringing meals to the royalty when no
Raking
one
the
else is
cinders.
available. So the prince, yeah, one day he goes to serve a meal to the king, and I think the king notices he's wearing a cap, and he tells him that it's not appropriate and that he should take his cap off before the king. And the prince replies that he has a sore on his head and that's he can't remove his cap. So the king kind of chides the cook in the kitchen, tells him like why has he brought a boy with such a thing condition into the service. So eventually the cook kind of goes to the the gardener, and exchanges his boy with the prince so that he can like work outside and not have to interact um, with the royalty that much. So so yeah, now the prince is working as a gardening boy, and one day he's out uh, working, and it's a really hot day, so he takes his cap off, and his shiny hair kind of reflects light, and the reflection goes into the princess's window, and she's astounded by the reflection, immediately goes to investigate, and in this distance she can see the gardening boy with his shiny hair. Um, so she immediately orders that he bring her wild like flowers. So he picks wildflowers, and eventually the gardener stops him and tells him why would he pick such wildflowers for the princess, and that he should be looking for rare type flowers. But
The prettiest
the
and the
prince,
rarest.
Mhm. But the prince responds that the wildflowers have the best scent and that the princess will like those the most. So he takes her the wildflowers, and she immediately starts to like interrogate him about the cap, or and asks him if he has golden hair,
Well,
which he denies. But
and also
she,
take your cap off. It's not seemly to keep it on in my
yeah,
presence.
yeah. So she once again brings up the court etiquette, like he shouldn't be wearing it. So I think eventually she snatches it off and sees his golden hair, and she gives him like golden coins um, to take with him. But he tells her that he doesn't need them,
Well, he
or,
just doesn't
or
care
he,
for them.
yeah, he doesn't
He
care for
didn't
them.
tell her that.
And he gives the coins back to the gardener for his children to play with. Um, and then on the second day, like the princess demands to see him again. And again, she wants to see his hair, which I think he does show her. And like, well, he's kind of forced to because of her demands. And she gives him coin again, but he again gives it to the gardener. Um, and then I think there's a third instance of the same thing happening. Um,
And she could not,
and
this time she could not get his cap away from him, and he would not have
yeah,
her money.
yeah. So he just outright refuses this time everything. So, um,
And then the
so
country was
there's that.
overrun with war not long after.
Yeah. So yeah, now the country's overrun with war, and the king sends prepares for battle, and the prince wants to go, but all the young men in the palace or wherever he they have taken like the best horses, and they leave him like a lame horse with like a messed up leg, and she's like an old, and they leave it to him, and they're kind of mocking him about about him going into battle. So
And and by the way, the enemy is much greater than the
mm,
king's forces.
mhm. So the prince now decides it's time to go into the forest and call upon Iron John. So he goes into the forest and shouts his name 3 times, and Iron John immediately appears, and he asks the prince how he could help him. And the prince replies that he would like one of the best battle horses. And Iron John says, I'll give you that and more than you ask for. Um, and he immediately sends like those people that take care of horses, like a Barnes uh
Stable boy.
stable boy, and the stable boy has this wild, strong horse, and behind them are like an army of knights, like in armor, and the prince takes the horse and goes off into battle, and by the time he arrives, the king's forces have fallen, and it's not looking good for the king, but with the prince's horse and his own little army, they defeat the enemy. So yeah, after that,
Well,
um,
they follow the enemy as the enemy
yeah,
retreats and cut them all down.
yeah. And immediately after the battle, the prince goes back into the forest and calls upon Iron John again. And he asks Iron John to give him back his lame horse. And so he exchanges the strong battle horse, and the army kind of goes back into the forest with Iron John. And he goes back to the palace where he's kind of mocked again by the other young men there, and he asks him if he was asleep in a bush in the meantime while the battle was happening. Um, and he kind of tells them that he actually did something important, but that just makes them laugh more, and they don't take him seriously. Um,
And also the
so
king, when he comes
yeah,
back from the war, the
hmm
daughter wants to congratulate him, but he gives the
hmm
credit to the mysterious
yeah,
troops.
yeah. So
And then
that
she asks
happens.
about the gardener where his boy was, but he just smiled and then said what you
hmm
just said about the gardener boy being mocked and mocked.
hmm Yeah, so that happened. And the king wants to find out who the knight was. Um, so he throws like a banquet for 3 days, kind of inviting, I guess, all the knights or whatever. Um, and one of the prizes they can get will be like a golden apple. Um,
That's right, thrown
so
by the daughter.
yeah, yeah. So on the first day, of the banquet, the prince goes back into the forest and he calls upon Iron John again. And Iron John tells him that he'll give him a red suit of armor and horse to go into I think it was a horse, or not, if I'm not mistaken, but to go into the banquet. So he shows up to the banquet in a red suit of armor, and
And a
yeah,
spirited chestnut horse.
oh yes, yeah, and he doesn't like reveal his identity, but he's able to catch the golden apple, and he immediately escape, like leaves the banquet, um, and it kind of disappears mysteriously. Um, and then on the second day, he shows up in a he he calls upon Iron John again, and this time Iron John gives him a white suit of armor
And
and
a white
maybe a
horse.
horse too. Yeah, white horse. So he shows up again and he catches the golden apple and he escapes again. And I think this time the king says that if on the third day he escapes again, that his men should give chase and cut him down if they need to. Um, so on
Yeah,
the
and kill
third
him.
day,
Yeah, stab him and
yeah,
everything.
on the third day he calls upon Iron John again, and Iron John gives him a black suit of armor. And he once again goes into the banquet and catches the apple, but this time the king's men chase him and wound him.
In the leg.
But yeah, in the leg, but he's, I think, still able to escape, I believe.
Yeah.
Um, and after that, uh, I think the king's daughter already has suspicions on who it is. Um, and
Yeah, she asked the
uh,
gardener about his boy.
yeah, she asks Gardiner, and he gives like a, I forgot what answer he gives, but
He is
that
at
he was
work in the garden.
work. Hmm
The queer creature has been at the festival too, and only came home yesterday evening.
Yeah.
He has likewise shown my children 3 golden apples which he has won.
hmm So she finds that tidbit out from the gardener, and I think she arranges, I think she calls upon him
No, the king
with her king
summons
or the
him
king.
into his presence, and he came and
Oh
again
yeah.
had his little cap on his head.
Yeah, and then I think the king asked him if he was the knight in the all those days in the banquet and at
That's
the
right.
battle, and
Also,
Iron
the
John tells them
also the
he
king's daughter like snatched the cap off his
yeah,
head.
yeah, he tells him that he was, and his hair is reeled after the daughter snatches the cap, and he offers to show him the wound too that he got when he was chased. Um, and at this, the king is astounded and asks him like how he could what he can do to repay him. And the prince says um, that he can give him his daughter in marriage. And the king also comments that he surely can't be just an ordinary garden boy, and he reveals his identity as the son of a king, too.
And
Um,
that also he has gold.
yeah.
And uh, my father is a mighty king, and gold have I in plenty, as great as I require.
Mhm. So like a wedding is arranged and the prince marries the princess, and the prince's parents are able to come to the wedding after they had given up on ever finding him after he disappeared into the forest. And towards the end of the wedding, another king shows up last minute, and he reveals himself to be Iron John and says that he was placed under a curse to be like a forest creature, but that the prince had helped him break that, and that now like all his treasure and riches will be his. And yeah, and that's where it ends.
That's right. Yeah, before he had left the forest as a boy, uh and Iron John had told him when he was saying that he could help him that he has more gold than anybody in the world, more gold and riches than anybody in the world. And then that echoes what the boy says when he finally reveals who he is, that he has great wealth. And, and gold have I in plenty as great as I require.